Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, How Kentucky Built a Statewide Database for Refugee Resettlement. My name is Laurel Rodriguez, and I am the Director of Marketing at Ecovia Solutions. Today we will be discussing Kentucky's strategy for building a statewide technology framework for refugee resettlement services, tips for improving data quality and reporting, and how to collect, analyze, and learn from data. Our presenters today are Maria Koerner and Kazim Noori. Maria Koerner is the Assistant Director for the Kentucky Office for Refugees. Maria manages federal grants that provide short-term cash assistance, intensive case management, employment services, and English language training for newly arrived refugees in Kentucky. She also provides policy guidance and support to the refugee resettlement agencies across the state. Maria received a BA in Communication from Bluffton University and a Master's in Social Work from the University of Louisville. Before joining the team at Kentucky Office for Refugees in 2013, she worked at Americana Community Center for 8 years. Kazim Noori is a former employee of the Kentucky Office for Refugees and now works as a consultant for system improvements and data analysis. Kazim manages the statewide database that refugee resettlement agencies across Kentucky use for case management and reporting. Kazim is also a refugee resettlement solution specialist for Ecovia Solutions. Kazim is originally from Afghanistan and came to the U.S. through the Special Immigrant Visas for Afghans program. He has a BA in Journalism and Communications and is a web developer and database expert. With that, Maria, I will go ahead and turn the time over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this webinar. As Laurel said, my name is Maria Koerner, and I'm the Assistant Director at the Kentucky Office for Refugees, which serves as the State Refugee Coordinator's Office for Kentucky. And I think most people on this call will know what I mean when I say we are a Wilson Fish state, so we are not in the state government. We're a Department of Catholic Charities of Louisville. So right now you can see a brief agenda of what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to talk for about 15 minutes about the kind of the history of this project and how we built this. And then Kazim, I'll turn it over to Kazim and he'll do a demo of some of the features in Client Track, and then we'll have time for Q&A. Okay, so all the services listed here are ones that we manage through the Kentucky Office for Refugees, which I'm sure everyone on this call is familiar with. We have temporary cash assistance programs, employment services, case management, English language trainings, and health screenings. So we are now able to track all of this through Client Track, and most of the data is entered directly by the agencies who are providing the service, mainly refugee resettlement agencies, but we also have providers that are other nonprofit organizations, community colleges, and the like. So we as the state office can see all of the data, but the agencies that are using it can only see their own data. Unless they make a referral to another agency, then a system is set up where they can share data. But we have made it so that case notes can never be viewed by another agency, even if they're sharing a client. And the way we have it set up, everyone can see basic demographic data. So if someone is about to enter someone in a database, it will give them a warning if that person is already in there entered by another agent. I think there's some maybe possibly state refugee health coordinators on this call, so I just wanted to mention the health data really quick. We do track the dates of the refugee health assessment and which clinic they were done in Client Track based on invoices we receive. And there's a lot of other health data that we keep right now in a separate database that was developed through a grant through the CDC called REDCap, but we have talked about possibly moving that over to Client Track at another time because Client Track is better than that database. So before I go on to the other slides that talk about different modules, I'm just going to give a brief overview of this project. So I started in my position in 2013, and at that time, our state office was using two different databases, one on Microsoft Access and one on an old online database. And this might sound familiar to some of you. And we had a full-time data entry staff person. So we had every agency that was providing services to refugees across the state send in paper forms to this one person, and she had to enter all of the data twice into each different database. And we had to have these two databases for the reports that were needed that we had to submit to the Office of Refugee Resettlement. Like one of them ran certain reports we needed, the other one ran others. So we just didn't have a complete database. So Catholic Charities of Louisville entered into an agreement with Client Track, and we started using it in 2014. But for the first year of the project, we did keep our old database, just one of them as a backup to make sure it was working. And it was impossible to start with everything at once, so we phased things in. We started by entering all clients served across the state and adding program enrollments, and then kept adding and adding different things and phasing out more paper forms. And we were able to eliminate the backup database after a year and a half into the project. So I'm going to discuss some of the features we've built, but I guess I just kind of wanted to let everyone know that switching databases is a huge project that takes a lot of work. As you know, if you're working in the Refugee Resettlement Program, there are a lot of federal regulations, a lot of reports to keep up with. So the overall goal of our project was to streamline processes and make things more efficient for the Refugee Resettlement Agency caseworkers doing the work so they can focus more on providing services to clients. And it has also allowed us as a state agency to do more database decision-making and make more accurate reporting. And it's also a lot easier to do the reporting and takes less time. And one of the things I think was most important when doing this project was getting feedback and buy-in from the providers who are going to be using the database. Because it can be hard to change whole systems, especially when you're in a nonprofit that might be struggling with staff turnover and limited funding, those kind of things. So we worked hard to gather the feedback of the caseworkers and the agencies that would be doing this and getting their buy-in and working hard to make sure it was more efficient for them so that they would want to use it. And we also had to make sure to develop guidance for the agencies so that everyone is entering the data the same way so it can be more accurate and meaningful. An example is telling people specifically what enrollment dates to use, what program exit dates to use, and which reason to use for which situation, things like that. So overall, we found the Client Track to be very adaptable. We can build what we need, and the Data Explorer function, which you're going to see later, as a really powerful tool for reporting. All right, so I'm just going to briefly talk about some of the different modules we did. So we in Kentucky implement a refugee cash assistance program as well as the TANF differential. So this is the program that has the most federal regulations tied to it. And we had a set of about 15 or 16 forms the agencies had to fill out for this cash assistance. And we recently launched a brand new module that has eliminated 12 paper forms so far with plans for more. We just had a training last week with both program and finance staff at the Refugee Resettlement Agencies to get them used to this module, and they started using it this week. It includes everything from enrollment to check and incentive requests, a way to verify monthly compliance with the program, income eligibility determinations, and employment exemption requests. I'll just talk about this because this is one of my favorite features that I don't think Kazim is going to show you. Maybe it's a favorite feature because it saved me a lot of time. So there are certain reasons that someone that's getting cash assistance can be exempt from employment. And in the past, we would have agencies send a paper form to our office with documentation, and I was the one that received those and approved those. And I have to review it, and then I'd have to remember to email the person that sent it to let them know it was approved, and I would forget to do that a lot. So now it's built in the Client Track where they go to the client's dashboard, request an employment exemption, they upload the documentation there, and it automatically generates an email that comes to me that says, this person from this agency has requested an employment exemption for this client and gives me the alien number, so please review. I log into Client Track, I review all the comments they made in the documentation, and then I select whether or not it's approved or whether I need more information, and then an automatic email goes to them letting them know the decision. So I just wanted to talk about that really quick. And one of the biggest features of this new module is the refugee resettlement agencies are requesting monthly checks for people that are currently enrolled in RCA or the TANF differential. At a time when arrivals were higher, they might be requesting hundreds of checks at one time. This was one of those time-consuming things. So now there's a form where it's all on one screen. It shows everyone that has an open enrollment, and they can choose what their next check should be. The amount, it generates an Excel sheet to go to finance. So they just did this for the first time this week, and we were told by one refugee resettlement agency that it took her half the time it used to take, and that's just in the first try. So that's saving her, she used to take 2 hours, and this time it only took 1 hour. We've also, Client Track does automatic calculations that agencies used to do manually and would sometimes make mistakes. Examples, it prorates checks for when it's their first or last check month that needs to be prorated. It automatically knows what the monthly amount should be based on their case size. and it calculates the percent of the federal poverty level once someone is working and turns in their income and whether or not they're still eligible for refugee cash assistance. All right. As you all know, employment services is the cornerstone of the Refugee Resettlement Program and one of the biggest indicators that is tracked and reported up to the federal government. So we use ClientTrack for all employment services. Every person that's enrolled in employment services gets an initial employment assessment that is recorded in ClientTrack, and this captures their previous work history, their education, their skills, and we have plans to eventually format this into a resume that can be automatically generated from ClientTrack. Every job placement is entered into ClientTrack, and it captures every data point that's needed for ORR reporting, including which cash assistance program and which employment service program the person was enrolled in at the time of the job placement. And through ClientTrack, we also have a list of employers that they connect the job placement with so that people can go and edit and add new employers and have their addresses, which has been helpful for various reasons, not just for reporting, but also for advocacy purposes when people want to know how many employers are hiring refugees and that kind of thing. We also track the 90-day retention rate through ClientTrack. Kazim worked to develop a form where job developers can search for every client who reached their 90th day of employment from one screen, and at a designated time period, they might want to see who reached their 90th day of employment in the month of October. And then they know they need to do follow-ups with every one of those clients, and then they can record whether or not they're still working at day 90 from that screen. And then it transfers it to their individual dashboard. All right, case management is another huge service that the agencies are offering throughout the state. So ClientTrack was able to track services for 7,500 people in fiscal year 2017. And I pulled that number from ClientTrack, which we had to report on the ORR 5. So anyone from state offices will know what I'm talking about. So in ClientTrack, we track various program enrollments along with the enrollment date, exit date, and the exit reason. And as programs are changing, it's very simple to end one program, add another, rename it. I was just doing this the other day because, as you know, some funding streams have recently changed with the Office of Refugee Resettlement. We set it up so that programs are tied to a type, i.e., is it an employment program or is it a case management program? So that way we can run queries that show side by side which programs a client is enrolled in at one time, which is helpful for reporting. For example, we can see all in one place that this person is in intensive case management and the TANF differential and Wilson Fish Employment Services, for example. There's also a way to track referrals to different programs in ClientTrack, which we don't use as much right now, but plan to do so in the future. So we have to do a family self-sufficiency plan for every newly arriving refugee that's on cash assistance or employment services. So we have now transitioned this into ClientTrack a couple years ago, actually. So there's two portions that we use on the case management side. We have a self-sufficiency assessment, which scores clients in different self-sufficiency categories over time, like housing, employment, English language skills, and health. And caseworkers score their clients, and we have definitions for them based on are they in crisis, at risk, moderately stable, or thriving. And we used to do this all on paper. Now that's in ClientTrack, we can run reports to look at how scores improve over time, which can be a performance indicator. So this is one way it's making the data more meaningful by being in a database and not on paper. We also do a case plan with each family. The caseworkers set goals with clients in specific areas based on where they're scoring low in that assessment. And before they close the case, they are now updating all the goals in ClientTrack to mark whether they were met or not completed, or if they were canceled. There's different reasons, and we can always add new drop-down reasons as we think of them. So we have been talking a lot as a state of how can we measure success other than job placement and employment, which is the main indicator that's reported to ORR. So we're looking at this could be another performance indicator, like how many goals clients met over a period of time. And another really great module that Kazim worked hard on in ClientTrack that the agencies really like is to track attendance and all the things that clients participate in, like English classes, cultural and work orientations, different workshops, et cetera. So this works for the cash assistance program because agencies have to monitor compliance, and one way they do that is by making sure that the clients are attending their classes, so they can do this, see this in ClientTrack now. And the teachers of the workshops and the classes can pull up a list on one screen of all active students and mark whether they were there that day or not. And then it transfers all to their individual dashboard. So we as a state agency, one of our roles is to go out and monitor the agencies we give funding to, the refugee resettlement agencies and other providers, to make sure they're keeping up with all the federal regulations. So this is also making our job easier because we're moving more and more things to client track. So instead of being printed out in a paper case file, we are seeing the case file as the individual client record on client track. And it's more, while people used to have to make case notes about this person went to their English classes this day, separate case notes for all these people. Now it's all done on one screen in client track, transfers to their dashboard, so it's making it a lot more efficient and not the need to write all these redundant case notes because you can already see all the information in one place in client track. And the final thing I'm going to talk about before we move into the client track demo is reporting. So like I've said before, client track has made reporting so much easier and more efficient. When I started this job, it was one of the worst things trying to figure this out. And, I was always supervising the data analyst position that we had, which we had some turnover of different people. And so I'm trying to figure out how to train them how to do this. And you have to pull this from this database, this from this database. So this one doesn't really run it right. So you have to change, there's just a lot of if this, but then this. And now it's just all done in client track through Data Explorer. So you see all these reports listed here. If you're in a state office, you're familiar with them. If you're with the Refugee Resettlement Agency, you might not be, but you probably have to report up to your state office, who then is reporting to ORR. But we complete all the trimester reports, the specific Wilson-Fish reports we have to do, the annual outcome goal plan, and the ORR 5, which was a new report that is now submitted annually. So everything that's entered in client track, any data can then be exported through Data Explorer, which is a very powerful tool with a lot of flexibility to set up the queries exactly how you need them. And then you can save them and label them. So we have like queries named, for example, Schedule B 1A on the OR 6. So we know every trimester. To click that, just put in the new trimester date and then all the data is there. It exports it in Excel. Kazim knows Excel better than me, so you can do the fancy pivot tables and all that to quickly get the numbers we need for the OR 6. In addition to all the required federal reporting, it's also just helpful to answer questions for media requests and community partner requests we get about arrivals and various things. It used to be kind of stressful when someone would call me and say, I need to know how many Somalis were resettled in Bowling Green from 2005 to 2015. Like there was not an easy way to run that, but now it takes like 2 minutes. So it's just a big time saver. And in addition to the queries that we run as a state office, we have also set up queries for all our subrecipient agencies to use, all the refugee resettlement agencies. So then when they would submit their reports to us, part of their instructions is you need to run this query, which is saved in client track for them. And then they just put in the dates of that report period. So this has really empowered them to manage their own data and vet their own data, make sure it's accurate, because now they can see what we're seeing. We're all seeing the same data. And we've also set up queries to help them manage their caseload outside of reporting. An example is just open enrollment queries. We have an intensive case management program, so case managers can go in and quickly push a button that says open ICM enrollments, and then it generates a list of all clients who have an active case. So they can see they can review and decide, do they need to exit their case? Are they still really providing services to them? Another query for who's reaching their 240th day this month, because Wilson-Fish states there's a 240th day requirement. So it's just really been helpful. Now Kazim is going to do a client track demo, and we're currently in the same office, so I'll still be here and available at the end for questions.
All right. Thank you, Maria. Good afternoon, everyone. Before logging into client track, I just want to take a few minutes to talk about how client track database is structured as a case management system. Client track is basically a client-centered case management system that every functionality that we have is built around a client's record. It starts with doing an intake and assessment, and based on your findings during that assessment, you know that which programs the client is eligible for, and we enroll them into those programs. After that, based on the programs and the eligibility criteria, we set goals for the clients. We provide services, and after a while, we do a follow-up with them. If they have become self-sufficient, that's good. If not, we repeat the cycle again. So the system itself is structured in a way that the data flows from your funding source to the program and services, and any client that you serve, you can track that data to the services and back to the programs and the funding source. So basically, when you first get client track, first of all, you set the grants or the funding source, and then you set up some programs and tie it to the funding source. Then under each program, you create services and tie it to those programs and define some eligibility criteria for each service. And the clients that are eligible for those services, you enroll them in the program and provide them with those services. And you can track your data in ClientTrack based on any of these elements. For example, you want to put your program as a base of your report, and you want to track that what services do I have tied to this program, which clients are enrolled to in this program, and what funding source we are providing these services from. Or you could do it based on a client, a single client, or a group of clients. If you want to know that this particular client or this particular group of clients, what services they have received and what programs they are enrolled in and what funding source this is coming from. So you can do all of that we will look later in ClientTrack. Then the data sharing is a very good feature in ClientTrack. An example of Kentucky, Kentucky Office for Refugees, or KOR, is the state office that manages the refugee resettlement programs in Kentucky. We have different agencies. If we consider this chart as an example, for example, if we have 3 agencies under KOR, KOR will be able to see data from all of those agencies. But agencies choose either to see records from each other or not to see. Or an agency can have multiple locations. For example, agency 1 has location A and location B. And agency 1 can see data from both of those locations, but other agencies will not have access to their data unless they choose to have a memorandum of understanding about data sharing. If they do that, they can share any data that is entered by any of those agencies, or they could do an info release agreement, which will be on a case-by-case basis. For example, if a client has first gone to agency 2, and then after a while, that client goes to agency 3 to receive some services, agency 2 can release that information to agency 3, and agency 3 will be able to see that information. So that is how ClientTrack is structured as a case management system. Now I will log into ClientTrack and show you the main features. All right. ClientTrack is a cloud-based system which is hosted in Microsoft Azure Cloud Services. And when you get ClientTrack, you are given 2 different environments, a training environment and a production environment. Today, what I'm showing you is our training environment that we use for demo purposes, for training purposes, and to build and test new features. So if I want to build a new feature, I come to my training environment, build it here, test it here, and when I'm sure that it is working the way I want it, I schedule a sync to bring those changes to production. The benefit to this approach is that whenever you are making any changes to your database, you are not touching your real environment or your data, and your users do not experience any errors. So you just build everything in the training environment. Once it is tested and working well, then you can sync it over to your production environment. When you first log into ClientTrack, you land on the most recent client's dashboard that you are on. And the first thing you see on the dashboard is the demographic information right up here about the client. This can be modified with whatever data you need. Then the second section is the family members, what family members are tied to this client. You can also upload a photo if you want. On the dashboard, you can also see the enrollments. Currently, there is no enrollment, but we will be adding one. Then you can see the services, the work history information, English as a second language program scores here, and you can see their health screening. You can see their referrals information. You can add as many sections as you want on the client's dashboard. But to start the demo, I want to use this existing client's information to do an intake just to save the time. But if you are working with a new client, you start with doing an intake from starting the intake workflow. When you start the intake workflow, it shows you the steps that are in this workflow. You do a client intake with entering their information, then go and search for duplicates and add their family members. We do a quick educational assessment, and then we see what programs they are eligible for. Today, to save the time, I will use existing clients' information to start the intake workflow, and when I do that, it pulls the existing clients' information with the data points that we are collecting. This is all very flexible. You can add fields and remove fields very easily if you need to. At the first section, we have the identifying information about the client. Then we have their contact information and address, their immigration information with their case number, alien number, immigration status, intake date, date of arrival in the U.S., and date of arrival in Kentucky. And we have if they are a secondary migrant coming from another state, if we say yes to that question, it will ask us information about their prior state. If we say no, it will not ask the information, and we have some demographic information. So when we close and save that, it will take us to the next step of the workflow, which is adding family members. Currently, there are 2 other family members added to this family, the spouse and son. But if you want to add another family member, we can just click Add New Family Member, and it will bring us the same intake form that we used. For example, if I want to add another client here, this is just a test. First of all, it pops up with the similar names just to make sure you're not entering a duplicate. If people have a similar last name or first name in the system, you can see that the system will pop up if you want to select any of those. But if you're sure that this is not a duplicate record, you can ignore that error and click Next. When you click Next, you can enter their date of birth. And when I click Next, it brings the address from the principal applicant's information. And all I need to choose here is the relationship of this client to the head of the family. For example, I can say this is another son. And when I click Next, it again takes most of the information from the PA's dashboard by default, just to save some more time. For example, the case number can be the same, but alien number, since it is very unique to every client, it will be blank. You can enter a new alien number. It will reformat it into our standard format. Then you can answer these questions, the gender, and click Finish. Just like that, it will add another family member to this family. Here is the new family member. And when I click Continue, it will take me to the next step of the workflow, which is doing a quick educational assessment. As you can see, for the 3 previous family members, an educational assessment has already been done. I will just do it for the new family member that we added. It will say no formal education, and click Save. And the last step of the workflow is bringing us a list of all the programs that we have. And here in the last column, it says this particular case is eligible for these programs and not eligible for some other programs. If it says pass, the client is eligible for that program. If it says fail, the client is not eligible for that program. So that way, the case manager quickly knows that what programs this client is eligible for. When I click Next, the workflow will finish, and it will take me back to the dashboard of that particular client. Once it is done, then we start enrolling them into the programs. I will enroll this case into a refugee cash assistance program. We have a whole menu for our refugee, for the cash assistance programs. The RCA, or the Refugee Cash Assistance Enrollment menu. When I click Add New, it will start a similar workflow looking form that I can choose the enrollment date and from the dashboard, it picks the 240th day of this case. That way I know that by this date, the client will not be eligible for this program. And if the client is a secondary migrant, I can still fill some more information about that here, then what other state the client came from. If not, I'll just say no, it will not ask me for that information. The program is by default selected as a Refugee Cash Assistance Program. This is the head of the case, and what family members do I want to include, I can just check those. So I will just include the spouse to this case and click next. When I click next, it was part of the Refugee Cash Assistance Program. We need to make sure that they are eligible for this program. So here are some more questions asking about that. So for these two family members that are in this RCA case, I want to answer the questions about their age category. They are between the age of 18 and 64, and they are employable. I'll answer those questions and click next. Is the case in compliance with FACSP? Yes. Does the case have an earned income? If this is a new case, at this point, we basically most of the cases will not have an earned income, but some cases, if it's a follow to join case, probably their spouse might have an income by the time the client arrives here. So we have another functionality for to evaluate their earned income. If we say that yes, this case has an earned income, it will ask us for who is working in this family, all the family members or someone else who is supporting the family, and you can upload the paycheck stubs for that working member, and it asks what the total income for this particular case is. And that way, by entering the total income of the family, we can determine their percent of federal poverty level based on their income and case size. For example, if I say that this family is making $1,500 a month, a client track automatically calculates based on the case size that I put here. If I put this is a case of 2, then in that case, $1,500 for the case of 2 will put them at 109.36% of the federal poverty level. But if this is not, at this point, if this is not required, I'll just skip this and say the case doesn't have an earned income. Click next. And here, case managers can request the first and or the second check at this point for this case. For example, if I want to request the first check for this case, I just select the service date as today, and I request their RCA check 1. And if this case has arrived in the middle of the month, this will be a prorated check. So this is a case of 2, and how many days are here in this month remaining that the client is eligible for this check? I would say 27. And based on our predefined rate, client track will calculate that case of 2 with this 27 days remaining in this month will be eligible for $459 for their first check. If it is the 15th of the month or later in the month, the sub-agencies can also request the second check for their refugee cash assistance, and they can also do it from the same screen. If I choose RCA check 2, this will not be a prorated, so that is blocked for me. This is a case of 2, and as soon as I put a case of 2, it will, based on the predefined rates, it will say that the case of 2 is eligible for $500. So I will request those 2 checks for this case at this point and click next. And in the last screen, I can just review this information and have the client, the principal applicant, and the spouse sign on the enrollment form using a mouse or a signature pad. And the case manager will also sign here and click finish. When we click finish, it will generate an email that the case manager can send it to finance department just by putting the email address up here. It will generate the body of the email that this is to inform you that the following client has been enrolled in RCA. That way they know that a new case has been created for refugee cash assistance. So once they send this email, if we go back to the client's dashboard, we can see now under the enrollment that this case has been enrolled into Refugee Cash Assistance Program with 2 members. So you can see here that a family can be will have 2 different accounts. One will be their initial family account that will include everyone in the family. For example, here, all the family members. But when you are enrolling them into the program, every individual client can have their own enrollment, or 2 or 3 or several members of the family can be enrolled in one program. In this case, only 2 members were eligible for RCA, and I enrolled only 2 of them. But if I go to the dashboard of one of the other family members that are not part of this enrollment, you see that their enrollment is blank. I'll go back to the principal applicant's dashboard. So we also requested 2 checks for this case. As you can see under the services, there are 2 checks created, RCA check 1 and check 2, and under the RCA cash assistance program for these amounts. And here are some eligibility questions that have been answered. And it also creates a check status that needs to be issued. Since the finance department has got an email that a new check has been requested, we have created another place for finance, or for depending on the internal process of the agencies, whoever does that, we have created another functionality that after a check has been requested, you can go and enter the check number. As soon as I come here, it tells me that there are 3 checks right now that are pending. They have to be issued. So once those checks are issued, I have the check numbers. What I do is I put the check number here, 1, 2, 3, and I issue both of these checks for this client. And when I click Save and Close, if I go back to the dashboard, it will say that the check has been issued under the services or on the dashboard. You can see that both of the checks have been issued and they are ready to pick up. And next time when the client comes in to pick up their check, what the case manager does, he or she goes to here and click Disburse and provides the client with the check. You can see the check information here and the disbursement date. The check number, since it has already been entered to the other menu, will be already here. And who is picking this check up or signing for this, you can choose the family members, or if it's a client that someone else is picking the check for them, you can select other adult, or in this case, I'll select the family member and have them sign here, then click Save. When you click Save on the dashboard, it will say that the check has been disbursed on this date. So you can do the same thing with the other check. That is quickly about enrollment and services. Now I will also enroll this client into an employment program so that later on I can enter a job for them. Another menu that we have is general for all types of programs for their enrollment. If I come to this menu, I can see that this client has been only enrolled to RCA program, but I can add new enrollments. When I click that, it starts an enrollment workflow. I can pick the program that I want to enroll them. For example, I want to enroll them to Wilson Fish Employment Services. And when I click that, based on the predefined eligibility criteria, the system says that the case is eligible for this program. If they were not, here it will say fail, and you could click on it and see why the client is not eligible for that program. When I click Save, it will ask me that what other family members do you want to enroll in this program. I can select to enroll all family members at once, or I can choose to the family members one by one. I will choose the second option. And when I do that, it will loop me through each family members by asking their name, that do I want to include this member into this program. I will say yes, I will not include this member, but I will include the spouse to this program. I will not include the child, and click finish. It will take me back to the client's dashboard, where I can see, if I switch back to the PA's dashboard, I can see another enrollment has been added for this client. So this case is currently enrolled in RCA and in Wilson Fish Employment Services. So another option that I want to show you is the employment or the job placement form that our employment team can create job placements and tie it to which employment service this is under, or which cash assistance this is under. If I click Add New, I can search for a list of employers. As Maria was talking earlier about a list of employers, we have a list of employers in the client track, but if your employer is not here, you can add it from this menu. But if the employer is already here, I will select one existing employer, and then I can tie this job to one cash assistance program and an employment service. So that means that which cash assistance this case was receiving when they got this job, and what employment services they were receiving when they got this job. If I click here, only the programs will show up that the client is enrolled in. I will select those two programs and select their job start date and put their position title. If I want anything with star is required, without it, it's not required. So I'll just put in the required fields here just to save some time. Starting hours per week will be 35 hours. Starting wage per hour, $10. And job located by client or the caseworker or the job developer. And what is the transportation to this job? It will be public transportation. Is health benefit available, yes or no? I'll say yes. After how many days? Available after 30 days. And date employment recorded will be defaulted to today's date. And we also want to track their childcare information. Does the client have a childcare? If who's providing the childcare? If we say family and friends, we can have before and after school program, or daycare, or not applicable. I'll select that and click Save. And we can also select that which job is this under this particular employment service. So I did not select this, that's why it's giving me an error. So I say that this is the first job. We track this because we want to know at the 90th day, usually we want to know that were they employed after 90 days of their first job. So that's why we want to record the number of jobs that they got under each employment service. So I will say this is their first job and click Save. Now it created one job here with the associated cash assistance and employment service. This is their first job, and this is how many hours they are working and how much they're making. Another functionality that I want to show you today is the English language training classes. We have a whole new, we call them workspaces here. We have a new, a separate workspace for the classes and the events that are currently running. If I click here, I am presented with a series of classes that are going on. For example, long-term English language training programs is one of the series. It's provided by this agency at that location. And if I click here, I can see what classes are going on under this series of classes. Then I can see there's only one class. As I say, this is our training environment just for testing, but in our production environment, we have all the classes going on right now. If I click I see the class, I can add new class or see the participants in this class. If I click there, there are only two students currently in this class that are actively participating. I can also see them by their status, active students or students that completed the class or students that exited the class. So it looks like for this test class, there are only two active participants. I can add a new participant. If I click here, it will bring a search form that I can search all the existing clients in the database and enroll them into this class and define their participation begin date and end date. So I will skip that. There are currently two students in this class. And there is an attendance recorder that agencies currently use this. When I click on attendance recorder, I click choose what class series I want to record the attendance for, and there's currently one class going on under this series. If I click that, I can see all the scheduled sessions for this class. There is only one participant scheduled at this session. These are all previous, so we don't have any upcoming sessions. But just to test it, we can look at a previous one. Let me look at one that has more than one participant. If I click on that, it will bring the current clients that are participating in this class, and I can just select their attendance status for that date. For this Wednesday, April 19, I can say they have attended or excused absence and excused absence, or this is a holiday. When you click that and click Save and Close, everything will transfer to their individual dashboard. When you go to their individual dashboard, you will see that which programs, which classes this client is attending. For example, if I want to, this client that we were looking at today, this is not enrolled in any class, but if I want to enroll them or register them into a class, I can click on class or event registration and see that there's only one class currently going on right now. If I click on register, this client will be registered to that class, and I can link that to one of the program enrollments. It's not required. And from which date to what date this client is supposed to go to this class. I say this client will go from today until the end of the year. So I will put the end of the year. I'll put 12/31/2018. So that will enroll this client into that class for that period of time. And when next time when I come to look at the event registration, I see that class 41, the client is participating, was registered in this class, yes. And there is also an attendance log that if a client has been attending the class, you can see their attendance log here. So the client is currently enrolled or registered in class 41, but we assume that there is no attendance at this point. But if there were anything, you would be able to see all the attendance records here with their date and attendance status and a quick statistics about their attendance, that how many days they attended, how many days they were absent, and how many excused absence they had for that class. All right. Just to save time, the next option that I want to show you is the Data Explorer, the reporting, which is a very powerful tool. If we come to the Data Explorer, you are presented with a list of your questions that you have previously asked. But what I will do, I will create a very quick question, for example, about I want to see a quick report about our arrivals. If I click on Done, I see all the domains about our clients. Each of these domains contain different type of information. We store our demographic information in client, cloud, or domain. When I click on that, it asks me, what do you need today? For example, I want to know just the client ID, their first name. I will not pick the first name and last name for this purpose. I'll just pick their date of arrival in the U.S. and their gender probably. And their name, birth date, date of arrival. Where is gender? Gender, sorry about that. So if I click run, it will give me those information about every client in the database. So later on, I will show you how to add filters. So you can see there are 64,000 clients. I have access to 64,000 clients just by one click. But I don't want to see everyone. I just want to see people who came in 2018. I can add filters. I can go to date of arrival in the U.S. and filter it. Show me the clients whose date of arrival in the U.S. is on or after 1/1/2018. If I click on that, I will be able to see all the clients that arrived in 2018. There are only 6 clients. I can export this to Excel or do some visualization here. But since we are running out of time, I will stop it here and open it up for some questions. Laurel?
Well, thank you so much, Kazim, and thank you, Maria, as well. So we do have a few questions that have been submitted, and the first one is, how many refugee resettlement agencies do you work with besides Kentucky Refugee Ministry?
We work with 3 refugee resettlement agencies in Kentucky that have 5 offices.
Okay, and then the second part of that question, did Kentucky Refugee Ministry adopt this database in replacement of what their national agency recommended, or do they use both?
That is a good question. So they have to use both because their VOLAG is Church World Service that requires a certain database. So they have to do that for all the RMT stuff, and then they have to enter everything in the client track for post-arrival services that are funded through our office. That's like a dream of mine to get the state coordinator's offices and the VOLAGs like agree on a standard database. I don't know if that will ever happen, but I know that they prefer client track and wish everything could just be in client track, but currently they have to use 2. But we have another resettlement agency, for example, Catholic Charities with USCCB, and USCCB does not dictate that they use a certain database. So they're able to use client track for everything. Perfect,
thank you. Okay, so the next question is around class enrollment, and they asked, for the class enrollment, do you use a signature pad or a mouse?
When clients are signing for enrollments, the refugee agencies have purchased signature pads that they can attach either to a computer or to an iPad and have people sign with that, which is usually much easier than a mouse. Or you can also just sign with like your finger on an iPad, which I think they're doing it different ways.
Okay, perfect. When they enroll, so it says, do providers use the class event registration or just staff?
Okay, sorry, can you repeat that question?
Do providers use the class event registration or just staff?
Just staff. Okay. I'm not sure I exactly understand what that means, but I mean, everyone uses that feature. So if one of our providers has an ESL class, then their ESL teachers will actually, they're the ones that go in, the staff of that agency, and register their students and keep their student attendance. Hopefully that answered the question.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Next question. Do you experience issues with data accuracy when RAs input data themselves? If so, how do you combat this?
That is another great question. So yes, we are having all the refugee resettlement agencies and other providers enter the data themselves. So I think I said earlier there's a lot of training that went into this and specific guidance of how they have to enter data. And we had to do this a lot more at first. We were doing data vetting on our own. So there are certain queries that we run regularly, and we kind of vet the data to notice errors. And something that Kazim added that was really helpful was in the queries we can include who entered it. So you can see if it's a certain staff person agency that's making a common mistake, you can just email them directly and say, I noticed that you've been doing this, you need to do it this way from now on. So when it comes to report times, they run their own data and send it to us, but then we will also usually run it to kind of compare. And lately it's been getting a lot better, like their data matches what we run. So data accuracy has improved, but there's been a lot of technical assistance. Yeah, we have provider meetings and we'll have a whole focus on entering data. It's not the most exciting topic, but it gets everyone to enter data the same way. And I think there's buy-in from everyone to want to do this because I think the agencies like seeing their own data and they can use it for their own purposes, whether it's advocacy or applying for other grants or that kind of thing.
Okay, perfect. Next question. How long did it take to create and implement this database from start to finish?
Another good question. I think I kind of alluded in the beginning that it's a lot of work and takes a lot of time. So we first started having agencies enter clients into the database in 2014, and now it's 2018, so it's been about 4 years. And I would say it's not completely done. Most of the features are built, but we're just continually improving it. So it's a lot of work, a lot of effort, and one thing I kind of had to remind myself along the way is it will never be perfect. You can't really design it in a silo until people use it. So that's why we decided to implement it piece by piece. So like this RCA cash assistance module we just launched, we know it's not perfect, but we need people to use it with real clients to make it perfect. So we picked this time to do it. That's one bright side of low arrivals. There's not really a bright side, but have less clients that are in cash assistance right now, so it's a good time to test this out. But yeah, to get to the point we are now, it took 4 years.
But just to add to that, we have learned a lot along the way when we were building this database. And now if you're working with new states that want to use this database, I'm sure it will take a lot less time since I now work with Ecovia Solutions also closely to bring this technology to other states. So I can estimate that with a new statewide project, it will not take us more than 6 months to implement the database fully.
Yeah, and I agree with that because now most of it is built. So we've done a lot of the work.
Well, and then a follow-up question to that is what growing pains have you experienced during the process of building out this platform? You may not have enough time to answer that a lot. But.
Right. I mean, the biggest growing pains were, I just getting, like I said before, the buy-in from the refugee agencies using it. There were a lot more complaints in the beginning than there are now, honestly, because now I think people are seeing the value in it, and that really does save a lot of time. And then the growing pains was making sure it was set up exactly the way to run the reports the way we needed, which is why for about a year and a half we kept our backup database, which we knew ran certain reports the way we needed, and we would compare them. And once it took about a year to get them to be like pretty much equal, and then we're like, okay, we can get rid of this, and now this is better.
Perfect. Well, so we are up against time. We do have, I don't know if Maria Kazim, if you have just a minute to answer one more question.
Sure.
Okay. So the next question is, when changes are made to the database, is this done by KOR or are you working with Ecovia Solutions each time?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Laurel?
Yes. So when you make changes to Client Track, are you doing them yourself or are you working with Ecovia Solutions each time?
Yes, I currently work as a consultant with Kentucky Office for Refugees. I personally do most of the changes myself, but due to some access limitations, sometimes there might be some very advanced coding involved that I will not be able to do. So Ecovia Solutions has always been supportive to help me with that. But most of the time I do it myself.
Right. So I'll just add to that, Ecovia Solutions was more involved in the beginning getting us set up in the platform, but now that it's going, most changes can be done directly by KOR through our contract with Kazim. But Ecovia is there if we need the more advanced support.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Maria and Kazim, for your excellent presentations and for the demo. And we thank everyone for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone.